Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Living Manna. Hi, guys. I'm Pastor Dave Sain, Senior Shepherd here at Living Manna. It's Wednesday night. You know what that means? Well, if you didn't, you wouldn't be here. It's Bible study time. Guys, get a pen, get a paper, get your Bibles open, get a couple of markers. The notes are there online. You can download them and follow us along. And of course, they'll be on the screen for you to see as well. Got an interesting study for you. We're still talking about the similar or same topic we've been talking about for a while, heading in a particular direction, talking about the deception and all the different assets and facets of the deception. It's important for us to know. We're going to talk a little bit about the war today, because this is a war. This is a battle that you and I are in. Spiritual warfare. What really is spiritual warfare? Anyway, that's going to be the topic for tonight. Again, thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. I hope that you're having a good evening where you are, or a good day, depending upon what time you're watching this. Hopefully you've had an awesome one, and now it's time to get down to it and open up Abba's Word. No real commercials for today, just the normal stuff that we always go through. You know, our Wednesday nights, we got Friday night coming up this night with Brother Max, and of course, our Saturday service. Other than that, same old, same old. But I'm really, really glad and happy that you guys are here with us tonight. All right, let's open up with a word of prayer, and then we'll jump right into this. Abba, we love you. Give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and hearts that are willing to obey. In the Master's name, amen. Amen. Okay, so for today, let me pop this up on the screen so you guys can see it. The title and the topic is The First Casualty of War. Now, as I said in the intro, this is connected to everything else that we've been talking about and what we're going to be talking about for the next few weeks as we get into all sorts of different topics. I guess the main theme here is we're talking about the deception. And of course, with the deception comes this concept of war. And I know we don't often think about it in this term, but this is how the scripture describes it. This is a war. This is a conflict. And you and I are right in the middle of it. And whether we realize it or not, everything that goes on in this war affects us one way or the other. And I don't think that that's a perspective that a lot of us, or a way that a lot of us look at this story, because you got to understand the story to understand where we are in this war. And ultimately, yes, at the end, does Abba's people win? Is the war won in the end? Yes, absolutely. But we're not in the end. We're not in the end yet. We're getting close. We're getting close to the end of the 6th day, but we're not at the end yet. We're still in there. We're still battling. We're still fighting. We're still coming out of darkness. The deception is strong. We've talked about the verse quite a few times. We can talk about it again tonight. Revelation 12. The enemy has deceived the whole world. Now, there is I picked this particular title because it actually, there's a saying that I've heard a lot of people say, but I'll share one with you in just a second, about the idea of casualty of war. In fact, let me just go ahead and let me just share that. Here it is. Let me make the screen a little bit bigger so you guys can see that. There you go. What is the first casualty of war? Now, when we say war, I mean, we're talking any type of war, all throughout human history. Whenever there's war, whenever there's conflict, it doesn't necessarily have to be a shooting war, just conflict. When there is conflict, one of the first casualties of conflict, or the first casualty of war, is truth itself. And of course, that's a quote up there from Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain during World War II and after. And he's quoted as saying, in war, truth is often the first casualty. And he's absolutely correct. Because what happens in war is propaganda. Propaganda from both sides. Nobody tells the truth. People tell propaganda. Governments give propaganda. Armies tell propaganda. You want to get your people excited and behind and in support of what it is that you're doing, and you want to make your enemy look as horrible as possible. And how do we do that? Well, we call it propaganda, but basically we lie. And we've been lying for a long, long time in every war there has ever been, from World War II all the way up to where we are today. Vietnam. We got into Vietnam from the Tonkin incident, a false flag. It was a lie. It just wasn't true. We went into Iraq for weapons of mass destruction. There were none there. It was a lie. It just was not the truth. And it's not something that's an American thing. This is a human thing. All countries lie. All wars. Truth is the first thing to suffer. Nobody wants to know the truth You want to know the propaganda that's coming from your side, or at least that's what you're told. We've seen this happen in our own culture, not in the context of war, but even in our own culture in the context of politics. One side of the political realm does nothing but lie about the other, and the other side does nothing but lie about them. And we're stuck in the middle trying to figure out truth when both sides are actually lying to us. Media is something I don't think that we can really rely on for truth because it's all slanted to whatever political view there happens to be. So the truth is really important, but just like Winston Churchill, and he wasn't the only one, I think Goebbels, who was the propaganda minister under Hitler in World War II, I think he famously quoted, and I'm not quoting it exactly, but I'm giving you a paraphrase of what Goebbels said, that if you tell a lie long enough and hard enough to the people, sooner or later, they'll believe it as truth. And you know what? Goebbels was right. He sold his country a huge lie. They were winning the war. The Jews were the problem with everything. This is how countries wage war. And again, Winston Churchill was correct. One of the first casualties of war, though there are obviously many casualties of war, but one of the first is the truth. And it is no different in the battle, in the conflict that you and I are in spiritually. Spiritual warfare. This is true spiritual warfare. I'm not talking about dealing with demons or ghosts or zombies or any of that other kind of stuff. And I guess, there's a place for at least some of that kind of stuff. But that's not really the spiritual warfare that I think Saul is talking about in Ephesians chapter 6. I think he's talking about the fight for the truth, because the truth is what matters. At least it's what should matter to us. And here, just up on the screen there, when we say the truth from a spiritual perspective, and we've talked about this before, so I'm not going to really, get into this so much. I know that you guys know this is a 101 concept, but we say truth, we mean Abba's word. Father's word is truth. By his word, of course, we mean his instruction. By his instruction, we mean his commandments. By his commandments, we mean his Torah. All of it is true. Now, I want you to think about this. Here's just two verses. Here's Psalms 119, and we could list probably dozens and dozens and dozens of them, but I want to get through some of this tonight. So here's just two, just to consider. Psalm 119 and verse 160. And it says, or the psalmist says, King David, the sum of your word. And when he says word, again, he means Abba's Torah, his instructions, his commandments, his right rulings. Depends on what version you may be reading, but all his law. All of those things are covered under the title, your word. The sum of your word is truth. And your righteous rulings, your commandments, are forever. This is King David, of course, telling us this. Messiah tells us no differently. Now, I didn't put the verse up there, but you guys should know this by now. In Matthew 5, chapter 5, around verse 17, the master says, do not think that I came to destroy, get rid of the Torah, the prophets. I did not. Why? Because they're Abba's word. And as long as there's a heaven and earth, those things remain. And here is the master in John chapter 17 and verse 17, again, actually kind of quoting, I would think, Psalm 119 and many other places, but he's praying for his disciples, telling Father that I have given them your word. And here's what he says, set them apart in your truth, meaning the disciples, set them apart in your truth, your word is truth. So if the saying is correct, and it may not be scripture, but I think it's absolutely correct, in war, truth is one of the first casualties. In this war, in this conflict that we are in, truth has been one of the first casualties. It's also, by the way, one of the most important things for us because we're told here his righteous judgments are forever. His word, his truth is established in the heavens. Messiah says it sets us apart. That's how important his truth is. So if there's an enemy, if there's a deception, if there's a conflict going on here, and there is, we're going to go right through it tonight, then one of the first casualties of this conflict is going to be the truth. Now, there's going to be lots of other casualties, including real death, real sickness, real mayhem, real killing, real murder, real physical war. All of that goes on too, because this is a conflict. But it is also a spiritual conflict. And the conflict, or the first casualty of this conflict, is the truth. Now think about this for a second. If Abba, in giving us his word, his instruction, whether it starts with Adam and Eve in the garden, to Enoch, to Noah, to Abraham, to eventually Moses, all of that is Abba's word. It is truth. Moses writes it down. From the time of Moses all the way to the time of Messiah, around 1600 years, Abba gave his word through Moses and the prophets. Of course, we spent a couple of weeks talking about how a prophet like Messiah, like Moses, is going to come, who is also going to give us Abba's word, just like Moses did. But for almost 1600 years, Abba's word stood as truth. It was the instruction on how to love Abba, how to know who he is, how to approach him, how to love others, how to be a husband, how to be a wife, how to be a child, how to be a good employer, how to be a good employee, how to be a good neighbor, how to go to war, to actually have real physical war, how to defend yourself, how to deal with conflict with one another, marriage issues, all of that, parental issues, all of that, children's issues, all of that is contained in the text, in the scripture. It's all truth. How to approach Abba, how holy he is, the things that must be done, the cleansing that must go on prior to approaching him, the necessity of a house, a place where Abba chooses to dwell, the necessity of blood and a sacrifice for the covering of sin. All of this was truth. All of this was information that Abba spent almost 1,500 years, or give or take, through the house of Israel, teaching them that truth. We would summarize that in the word truth, or Torah, or instruction, or law. And what today, and it's not just today, it's been going on for quite a while, what has been one of the first casualties of this spiritual war that we're in? Well, what have we all heard? We've all sort of gone through this, depending upon, what group you came from, what your background was. But I guarantee you, sooner or later, at some point in our past, we all heard the words that the instruction's not for us. The Torah doesn't apply. We're not under the instruction anymore. There are no more feast days. All of those things, including the Sabbath and even some of the other instructions, have gone by the way. Now, true, religion keeps some things, but Abba didn't give us some truth. He gave us his whole truth. And what has suffered in this battle? Truth. Just like it does in every other war there has ever been. And I want to show you that we are in a conflict. This is a war. So a little bit of review, but I want you guys to follow along with me. We traveled some of this road last week. The war has been declared. So what I want to do today is I want to sort of give you a bird's eye view. I'm going to share some kind of neat, interesting things with you, but also I want to give you a bird's eye view of the war, because we're going to get into the specific deceptions. We're just not going to have time to get into some of that doctrinal stuff today, but I want to give you a bird's eye view of the war. I want to show you how consistent it is, if we've got eyes to see and ears to hear, from the beginning of the book all the way to the end of the book. It's the same story, or the same idioms, the same words, the same phrases, the same mental pictures are given to us in the beginning of the book, which starts the conflict, all the way to the end of the book, which ends the conflict or the war. And so we need to understand that to understand the deception, kind of what's going on. So tonight's really sort of a bird's eye view, maybe a little bit of review for some of us, but bear with me, because all of this, once we put it all together, is going to make a whole lot more sense. When you put all the pieces together, it all sort of fall into place. So the conflict's already been started. We talked about this already. War has already been declared. Not yesterday, not 500 years ago, not 1,000 years ago. We're talking about the garden. The conflict started, at least for us, the conflict started all the way back then. And of course, I'm not going to go over the whole story of Genesis. You guys know this, but here's just Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. Of course, you know the whole deal. She eats of the fig tree. Fig tree. Yep, if you read Jubilees, it's fig tree, not apple tree. I know everybody wants to blame the apple. Fig tree. And then what do they put on themselves? Fig leaves, because they ate of the fig tree. And of course, she realizes she loses her righteousness. Death enters into the world. Adam eats it as well. And now punishment comes towards them. Abba they broke Abba's word. So what was the first thing that went in this conflict? Did Abba really say? Truth. Truth was the first casualty in this conflict. And then, of course, the second casualty was Adam and Eve. And, of course, everybody else that follows after them. So in every war, while truth may be the first casualty, there's lots of real casualties too, real physical people casualties that go on in this as well. I'm going to cover some of that tonight on top of everything else. All right, so Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. So here's that sort of judgment scene, if you would. And we went over this last week. If you go back to last week's study, you can get some of the definitions. I went out and I put the Strong's or the Young's version in it so you can see what these words mean. We sort of took it apart and compared it with 2 Thessalonians, seeing that this is actually telling us the same exact thing 2 Thessalonians tells us. But check out last week's study for that. I don't want to go through all of that again. But here's Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. And it says, "And I will put enmity." It's not a word that we sort of use today in English. We wouldn't say, we'd say, maybe I'm going to make an enemy, right? Someone's going to be your enemy. Well, that's probably a more modern way of saying it. But I will put enmity, conflict, war. There will be a conflict between you, speaking of the devil. Now, it's the serpent, but it's really the one upon whom the serpent is speaking for. The serpent in this case is speaking for the devil. And this is why here's an idiom that comes up right in the beginning. This is why the devil is always known as the serpent, the snake, the dragon. It's not that he is a serpent or that he was this serpent or that he was that dragon or that he is that snake. It seems that this is the entity he used. This entity, this animal became the mouthpiece for the devil. So this judgment really has 4 different characters to it. I will put enmity between you, that is the devil and the woman, or the serpent and the woman. And between your seed, that is the seed of the serpent, or we use the word seed, but let's be just a little bit more up to date, between your children, your seed, and her children. So there's four characters here. There's the serpent, who is the devil, Satan, the deceiver. There is the woman. We know her as Eve, but she's referred to as woman. There is the seed or the children of the serpent. That's 3. And then there is the children or the seed of the woman. Now, you're going to see in a second, this is probably one of it's not the first messianic prophecy, but it's the first one in English people realize. Here's a messianic prophecy because he's talking about the seed, and he says, "And he, this coming seed of the woman, shall crush your head." That is, the head is the devil. Check out last week's definitions. The serpent. "And you shall crush his heel." Now, often, we read that and we're thinking, the crucifixion story and putting the spikes into his heel. And maybe that's a reference to it. But if you check out some of the definitions we talked about last week, that term, crushing the heel, means to restrain. He's going to restrain the seed. He's going to hold back the seeds. It's the job of the serpent to hold us back, to restrain us, which leads us right back to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Again, check that out from last week. All right, so the war's been declared. Shouldn't be news to us. We got this. We know this. The war's already been declared. This conflict, this battle has been going on for a long time. And as I said, Abba takes about 1,500 years, give or take, to give us truth so that we get it, so that we understand it, so that by the time the Mashiach comes, we have enough understanding of truth to understand what he's saying as he now fulfills, gives us, fills up our entire understanding of what the whole story was really about. But he never takes away the truth that was already established. He amplifies it. He helps us understand it. The battlefield, so this is the beginning of the battlefield, right? So here's the start of the story. We're going to fast forward now, kind of all the way to the end. And really it's all the way to the first century, but in our mind's eye, this is a story about the ending or close to the ending. The battlefield has changed, because the battlefield in the beginning was the garden. It was that tree. It was the place where, where the fig tree was. That was the first battlefield. Now the battlefield has become, we're going to find out, the battlefield has affected the heavens, even though we find this out even way before we get to the New Testament, or we get to the book of Revelation. We find this out in the story of Job. We find out that the deceiver has access to the midst, to the place where Abba is, to the throne room, back and forth. The whole story of Job gives us a little insight into that. But now, by the time we get to Revelation, we're going to see that the battlefield changes. And all battlefields do. You gain ground, you lose ground. Well, Satan's going to lose some ground, but he's also going to gain some ground here. And here is Revelation chapter 12. I'm sorry, I went a little bit too far. Here's Revelation chapter 12. So this is I want you to realize these same idioms are being used. And let me see if I put it on this tile. Yeah, I did, but I'm going to go here. These same idioms are being used. All the way at the bottom here, you can see I've got these four idioms. And I want you to realize as we read this, these are the same idioms, the same words, the same mental pictures that are given to us in the story of the garden. And these same idioms follow all the way through the text, all the way through the book. And there are times when they mean different things, or they refer to different people, but the meaning of the term remains the same. It's still telling the same story. The conflict, the war, is between the serpent and the woman, and between the serpent's seed and the woman's seed. That remains constant throughout the book. So by the time we get to Revelation chapter 12, here's verse 1. Again, should be familiar. We talked a little bit about this last week with 2 Thessalonians, but here we go. It says in Revelation chapter 12 and verse 1, "And a great sign was seen in the heavens," or in the heaven, the Shamayim. "A woman clad with the sun, with the moon under her feet." Wait, hold on. Wait a second. What is there? There's the woman. We're going to wind up getting a similar story as we did in the beginning, because it's the same story. It's the story of the conflict. "A woman clad with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And being pregnant." So this woman is about to have seed. This is Genesis 3. "She cried out in labor and in pain to give birth." Verse 3. "And another sign was seen in the heaven, and see a great fiery red dragon," there it is, there's the serpent, "having 7 heads and 10 horns." Now you may not catch it, but I want to show it to you. I want to mention it so you realize that's his seed. That's the serpent's seed. 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns on his head. In these first 2 verses are all 4 of the idioms of Genesis chapter 3. Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. You've got the woman, you've got the serpent, you've got the seed of the woman coming. Now, in this particular case, we're talking about Messiah, but it means multiple things. It means us too. And you have the seed of the serpent, the 7 heads, 10 horns, all the crowns. Those are the ones who now speak for the serpent, just like the serpent in the garden spoke. So same 4 idioms. Now I want to give you some definitions here to maybe help us understand as we read through some of this, what some of these prophetic idioms mean as we travel through the scripture. Because in the beginning, when we said woman, well, that was kind of easy because there was only one person it could have been, Eve, right? She was the one that was there. She was the woman. Okay, fair, good. Does that mean that the woman always means Eve all the way throughout the scripture? No, the story is going to evolve. The term's going to stay there, but the character is going to change a little bit, but the conflict isn't. It's always going to be between the woman and the serpent. So the woman eventually becomes Israel, becomes the people that get out of Egypt and go to Mount Sinai and becomes the mother, the woman of the northern house and the southern house, Israel and Judah. This we read in the book of Ezekiel. You can look it up in chapter 16 and chapter 20, where he talks about Israel. He talks about the northern house and the southern house, how they are the daughters, that is Jerusalem and Samaria, they are the daughters of one mother, one woman. The one woman is the tribes of Israel, the tribes of Jacob that get out of Egypt. That starts the story. So the woman, by the time of Mount Sinai, is in fact the house of Israel. Typologically, it was Eve. Now, typologically, it is the house of Israel. Forward fast in time, and Jerusalem. Judah, after the northern house is scattered, Judah is the only place there is. It's where the temple is. Jerusalem, the capital of Judah, also gets referred to as a woman. And of course, by the first century, there is no northern house anymore. There is only the southern kingdom. And the southern kingdom, while they call themselves Israel, they also call themselves Jews. So when you say the woman, you can mean Eve. It can mean Israel. That is the people that went to Mount Sinai. It could be Jerusalem, the mother of us all. We'll take a look at that in a second. It could be the Jews. It is also Miriam, the mother of Messiah, because this is also telling us a specific story, as in Revelation 12 here, of the birth of Messiah. So who gave birth to Messiah? Well, Eve gave birth to Messiah, right? Well, Israel gave birth to Messiah. He's a child of Israel. That is the people that went to the mountain. Jerusalem, who's the mother of us all, gave birth to Messiah. The Jews, Miriam and Joseph and the whole family, were of the house of Judah. The Jews gave birth to him. And of course, Miriam gave birth to him. All of them fit the type. And while they all tell us a little bit different part of the story, it's still the same idiom. It's the woman. The seed of the woman, in this particular case, in Revelation 12 here, is going to be Messiah. He's not the only seed, though, but he's the seed. But he's a child. He's a child of Miriam. He's a child of Jerusalem. He's a child of Israel. He's a child of Eve. He is a child of Judah. The serpent here, in this particular case, is Rome, because that's the historical context that this is being written in. Now, it's many of the nations. It's 7, in fact. It says, a great fiery red dragon with 7 different heads. Well, the 7 heads start off with Egypt, and then Assyria, and then Babylon, and then Medo-Persia, and then Greece, and then Rome, and there's another Rome coming on the heels of the Rome for the 7th beast, another Rome that's coming, a religious Rome. Same Rome, but Rome gets religious. Those are the 7 heads. Well, here it is. So he's talking about the children, the nations that serve the beast. This is Revelation 13. It talks about all the different nations who are empowered by the dragon. So we've got the dragon, that is the serpent, that is the devil himself, and now we have his seed. So all 4 of these entities, and again, they've changed, because we don't really get the definition of what they are in Genesis 3. It just says the seed of the serpent. We don't know that. We don't know that the seed of the serpent is Egypt and Assyria and yada, 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 all the way through to Rome and all the way up to where we are today in the nations today. We didn't get that in Genesis chapter 3. The story had to evolve. Abba had to give us more truth, had to give us truth to help us understand these concepts. But here it is. So this is we got the beginning of the story, and now we're reading here sort of the ending of the story. Well, it's the ending of the story in a second. It's really the beginning of the story of the Messiah. Here's the conflict that begins. All right. Here is, so what happens? The war goes on. The serpent continues to wage war. He does exactly what Abba said was going to be done in the garden. Now, this war went all the way through the whole history of Israel. We just don't have time to go through all of that. So I wanted to speed up to the time of Messiah. But the history, the conflict between the serpent and the woman's been going on much, 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 much longer than that. and throughout history. And we'll talk some about that at another time. So if Revelation 12 is telling us a woman's about to give birth and the serpent is there to try to steal, to kill that child, here's Revelation chapter 12. I'm right here, guys, so you can see. Revelation chapter 12 and verse 4. The next line in Revelation says, and it means the serpent, the devil, the one behind, the one who gets the term serpent attached to him, though he wasn't actually a serpent that did it. And the serpent, his tail drew a third of the stars of the heaven and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth to a seed, an offspring, a child, to devour her child as soon as it was born. So the conflict that we read about in Genesis 3, it's happening right here. Of course, for you and I right now, this is history because we're talking about the birth of Messiah. But even while this was written, it was already history by, some 67, some 80, 90 years. It was already history, but very, very recent history. So this prophecy is telling us about stuff that did happen. It's going to tell us about stuff that is happening as it's being written, and it's telling us about stuff that's coming in the future, as all prophecy really does, including all the parables as we've been learning on the weekend. So this serpent wants the child dead. He is doing what the conflict or the enmity at the beginning of the story said he would do. He's going to be in conflict with the woman, and his seed is going to be in conflict with her seed. Well, it's not that the serpent goes down there and tries to get rid of Messiah. It's not like the devil shows up and tries to take Messiah away from Miriam and Joseph. He uses his seed, the nations. Here's Matthew chapter 2 and verse 13. This is, of course, after the birth of Messiah. The wise men, the Magi come, the one who read the stars, who understand the Mazzaroth. They go to Miriam and they go to Joseph. They bring their gifts, and Joseph is told in a dream, get out of there, go to Egypt. Here's Matthew chapter 2, verse 13, just for a verse. It says, and when they had left, see, a messenger of Yah appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, arise, take the child, PDP version, the seed, and his mother, PDP version, the woman, and flee to Egypt, and remain there until I bring you word. For Herod, PDP version, who is the seed of the serpent, and he is under the foot of Rome. So actually, who's kind of really calling the shots here? The nations are Rome, the seed of the serpent, Herod, but it's all connected. So even in Matthew 2:13, we've got really, I guess you could say, all four of the characters, because we've got the woman, we've got the seed, we've got Herod, who's working for the dragon. The dragon, for Herod is about to seek the child to destroy him, which is exactly what Revelation 12, verse 4, told us happened. Again, Revelation 12, at least the beginning of it, is about what had happened leading up to the time of the birth of Messiah. And of course, you can see in the picture there, it's just an artist depiction, because obviously Messiah is not there. Miriam and Yusuf take him away to Egypt. But of course, we know the story that Herod does wind up killing whatever children live in the area of Bethlehem 2 years and under. This killing of the innocent, I guess, is how it's become known throughout history. And here's just a bird's eye picture. What we're watching right there are casualties of war, right here. The truth is the first casualty, but it's not the only casualty. Real people die in this story. Real people suffer in this story. Real hardships come to the people, on the people that are trying to follow Abba and the people that don't follow Abba. There's conflict between them. And sometimes, very, very often, that conflict spills into real physical conflict and can cost one their life, if not everything leading up to their life. And there's just sort of a scary picture. This woman's obviously sitting there. She's holding her baby. The temple guards are coming through. The king's guards, maybe even the Romans, are coming through, and they're killing, taking their swords, and they're killing every child. That's every male child. under 2 years old in the area of Bethlehem all the way up to Jerusalem. So, casualties of war. But the truth is the greatest casualty. Okay, so the war wages on. So now we got another little glimpse of the war. Starts in Genesis 3. We get the picture in Revelation 12, talking to us about the picture of what goes on here in Matthew chapter 2. All right. The serpent doesn't stop. Because obviously Messiah got away, right? Miriam and Joseph, they went to Egypt. They don't come back until Herod's dead. Does that mean the serpent gave up? That battle's over? War's over? Doesn't work that way. Serpent's not going to give up to the end. And neither is his seed. And this is really important that we can identify accurately when we say seed of the serpent. Yes, it's the nations. It's the nations that are in opposition to Abba that will do everything they can to stop Abba's plan through the serpent. But the seed of the serpent are also Jewish people here. They're also the priests, the leaders. They are the religion of their day that has forgotten the truth. So I guess in one sense you could say they're a casualty of war because the truth's been taken from them. And because the truth has been taken from them and they don't have the truth, they cannot understand who Messiah is. So I feel bad, sad for them in one sense, but in another sense, it's the story. This is the story. So here's John chapter 8, verse 40. I know some very familiar ground. We've covered it a couple of times, but listen to the words of the master. He says, but now you, he's speaking to the seed of the serpent, the Pharisees, the priest of his day. But now you seek to kill me, just like Herod did, just like the one who was the servant of Rome tried to do. You seek to kill me, the seed of the woman. So they're working on, we will find out in a second, they're working on behalf of the devil. So you've got the devil there. That's one of the idioms from Genesis 3. You've got the seed of the devil, the seed of the serpent. You've got the Pharisees, the priests. You're trying to kill Messiah, who is the seed of the woman. A man who has spoken to you the truth. What's the first casualty of war? The truth, which I heard from Elohim. Abraham did not do this. Of course, I'm skipping down to verse 44, but it says here, you are, meaning they are the seed of your father, the serpent, the devil. And the desires of your father you wish to do. He was a murderer from the beginning, because that's what you do in war. You kill. He was a murderer from the beginning. And of course, what are they going to do? Well, they're going to do exactly what their father tells them to do. And of course, you know the story. They wind up plotting his death and getting him arrested. Now, ultimately, yes, can you say, and certainly Messiah says this, no one takes my life, I give it. Yes, absolutely. Amen to that. 100%. He was a willing sacrifice. But the fact still remains, these people plotted murder in their heart. They wanted him dead. No different than Herod did. They wanted him dead. And they got what they wanted. Not maybe, for sure, there was another work going on here. Another plan was also going on here. But they were still doing the deeds of their father. Here's John chapter 19, verse 26. And here's something really interesting. This is at the cross, right? So who's there at the cross? And I maybe should have given you some more scripture, but let me just paint the picture for you. You've got Sadducees and Pharisees standing there at the cross. They are the seed of the serpent. You've got the Roman soldiers who are empowered by the serpent. They are part of the 7 heads and 10 crowns. They are there doing the crucifixion. You've got the Mashiach on the cross, who is the seed of the woman, Miriam, who is standing there. What do you have at the cross, at Golgotha? What do we have? Genesis chapter 3, verse 15. That's the cross of Messiah. That's the beginning picture of the war, of the conflict. Obviously, this is another snapshot of the conflict, and the conflict's not over yet. But this is a big, big turning point in the war. And look what happens here. This is the master. Then Yeshua, who is the seed, seeing his mother, the woman, Miriam, and the taught one whom he loved, obviously we're talking about Yochanan, John, standing by. He said to his mother, woman. Now, that may just say, oh, that's just arbitrary. That's kind of the way they talk. Yeah, it probably is arbitrary. It probably is the way they talk, but it is also a spiritual connection to get you all the way back to Genesis chapter 3. The idiom remains the same. Yes, it's being used in a little bit different context, but the idiom is the same. The woman is there. Where? At another tree. At another tree that's cursed. Where was she the first time? At a tree that was cursed. She's there with another tree that brings a curse, except this time the one on the tree, is going to take that curse. Another message for another day. So he says to his taught one, he said to him, woman, see your son. Now, I'm just putting the PDP version in there. See your seed. See your child. See your children. So not only, obviously, is Messiah the seed, the child, but Messiah, now you say, well, what Master's really doing? He's just really sort of handing over the responsibility as he's keeping the commandment, honor your father and mother, and he's making sure his mom's going to be taken care of because John's there. Yes, amen. He's keeping the truth. He's doing what he's supposed to do, but it's also serving a much higher purpose, telling us that John, and we're going to find out all the rest of the disciples, all the rest of the people of the way, are also called the seed, the children, the offspring of the woman. Then the taught one, he said, see your mother. And from that hour, that taught one took her to his own home. Don't you think all the rest of the disciples, did everything they could for her as well? Of course. I mean, how could they not? But that's not the issue here. The idioms remain the same. The mental picture remains the same throughout the book. This is the conflict. This is the war. And as we said, there are some real casualties in this war. So, seed of the woman. Here's a couple of verses. Are we, in fact, the seed of the woman? Yes, absolutely. We are children of the woman. Are we direct descendants from Miriam? No, but spiritually speaking, we are. Here's John chapter 1 and verse 12. But as many as received him, that is Messiah, to them he gave authority to become, here's the PDP version, seed of the woman. Now it says, of course, the authority to become children of Elohim. But a child of Elohim is also a seed of the woman. Who did he bring out of Egypt? The woman. And got into covenant with her. Her daughters break the covenant. The northern house is scattered, the southern kingdom stays until the one who renews the covenant with the northern house and the southern house comes. The woman. To those believing in his name. So what are we given authority to become? Children of Elohim? Yes. Sons of God? Yes. But in another sense, children of the woman. Seed of the woman. I'm not making this up because listen, the same thought goes on. The Apostle Paul brings up the same thought. Now here he's talking about the difference between Hagar, the one woman that has Ishmael, and Sarah, the child of promise. And I don't want to get into what all of that means. I just wanted to focus on this one particular part of it. At the end of that whole story, here's what he says. He says, but the Jerusalem above is free. So he's contrasting the Jerusalem that's down there on earth, putting it in the place of Hagar, and the Jerusalem that's above, the city of promise, like Sarah. But the Jerusalem above is free, which is the mother, the woman of all of us, or of us all, the seed. Now, the Jerusalem on earth is as well, because that's where they all came from. But he's saying the spiritual mother now of us, the Jerusalem we should be looking to, is not the Jerusalem that's there in the Middle East. We should be looking at something bigger. And of course, you see this later on at the end of the book of Revelation. Jerusalem appears as the bride, the woman at the end. Now, it's not that Jerusalem is the woman, it's the people within the city that make her the woman. So that's sort of the context here. So here, again, we're talking about the same idiom, the woman, And it's appearing in multiple different places, each with a little bit different take on it, but you need to put it all together to understand the entire story. It says, for it has been written, rejoice, O barren. I'm right here, guys. I'm going to highlight that in yellow so you can see it. Rejoice, O barren, you who do not bear. Break forth and shout for you who do not have birth pains. He's talking about Sarah versus Hagar, right? Hagar had a kid, Sarah didn't. For the deserted one has many more children. She's going to have many more seed than she who has a husband. Meaning that Sarah, because this is actually Isaiah 54:1, where it's talking about Sarah and Hagar. That Sarah is going to wind up having many more children than even Hagar will, because from Sarah comes the whole house of Israel. Here's Revelation chapter 12, verse 6. It goes on. It says the next part in that Revelation chapter 12 story, which is the war, the conflict. The next verse, verse 6 says, and the woman. Now, I'm going to start to put some of these things together. By woman, we can mean Israel. We can mean Jerusalem. We can mean Judah, or Jerusalem. We can mean the Jews. We can mean Eve. And we can mean Miriam. They are all placeholders for that idiom. They all tell the story as it moves through history, as the story of the conflict that starts in Genesis 3. So Revelation 12, verse 6, it says, and the woman, now I'm going to put Miriam because that's the literal context of what's being said, because Miriam's the one that has him. Miriam, and it wasn't just Miriam. It's Miriam and the disciples. They fled into the wilderness. See, we read that, and people kind of get all confused here. So what is he talking about? And the woman fled into the wilderness, where she has a place prepared for her by Elohim to be nourished there 1,260 days. He's talking about the disciples who are now sons of Elohim, sons of the woman from Eve in the beginning, from the house of Israel, of Jerusalem, of Mary. They're all disciples. Who's my mother? Who's my brother? These are my mother and my brothers. This is the family of Elohim. They now are all children. So the woman, Miriam, the people of Jerusalem, Jews who are disciples, get out of Jerusalem. They flee to the wilderness, where she, the woman, has a place prepared by Elohim to be nourished for 3.5 years. We're going to find out that 3.5 years during that time frame that Revelation 12 is talking about here, it's the destruction of the temple. Destruction of the temple doesn't happen overnight. It takes 3.5 years of conflict, war, before the temple is actually destroyed. 1,260 days. And there's another number later on in Daniel that if you make it to that, then you're okay. But let's just deal with this for right now. It says, and there came to be fighting in heaven. So the conflict comes, the woman gives birth, the serpent is there to try to kill it, Revelation 12 tells us. He doesn't get a chance to. The child is caught up to Elohim. He's raised from the dead. He does actually kill the Messiah, or at least is partly responsible for the death. But Messiah is raised from the dead, brought back to the right hand of Abba, and now it's telling us after that this woman has to flee into the wilderness where she's going to be nourished for 1,260 days. And then it tells us when this is going on, when the woman has to flee, and there came to be fighting in heaven. And Michael and his messengers fought against the dragon. Now this we haven't really seen. We do see this one other place. We'll get to it in just a second. So whatever conflict, this conflict has evolved, this war, this enmity has evolved, where at some point there must have been access by the serpent to that place where Elohim is. And from the time of the resurrection, there's no more access. He gets removed, and those that are with him get removed. And they get removed by Michael. This goes right back to 2 Thessalonians chapter 2. Again, check out last week for more info on that. So Michael and his messengers fought against the dragon. And the dragon and his messengers fought, but they were not strong enough. I mean, this is crazy, crazy thought, guys, that there is conflict. Because some people look at this and say, well, is he talking about conflict that happened, way before the whole deal with the serpent and Mary. No, he's talking about what's happening here after the death and resurrection. Here's where this conflict occurs. So there's been access for quite some time, for the whole time that Abba's been given truth here on the earth to his people. For all that time, the serpent's been there holding back, restraining, pulling back the people. But now the Messiah is coming. He's opened it up, and he's going to open up the seals, and he's going to let it all out. No more restraining. He's going to let it all out. That doesn't mean the enemy's done. Doesn't mean the battle's not done. Doesn't mean the war's done. But it's changing. It's shifting. As all battles, as all wars do. It says, in the dragon and his messengers, I'm right here, guys. Let me just highlight that again in yellow. And the dragon and his messengers fought, but they were not strong enough, nor was place found for them in heaven any longer. And the great dragon was thrown out, that serpent of old, called the devil and Satan, who leads all the world astray. So again, I keep saying this, but it's everybody. He's going to do it he has done it to everybody. He's going to do it to everybody. He was thrown to earth, and his messengers were thrown out with him. So when he gets thrown to earth, what does he do? Using his seed, that is Rome, using the seed of the serpent, the nations, he's going to destroy the temple. I.e., why the woman has to leave and go to the wilderness where she will be nourished for 1,260 days. It's during the temple siege. Now, there's more to it than that, but here's Luke chapter 21:20, so that you can see this is exactly what Revelation's talking about. And this is the master talking about what's going to happen. Rome's going to come in. You're going to see Jerusalem surrounded by Rome. And when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, by Rome, by the serpent, then know that its laying waste is near. Jerusalem, the temple. Then let those, PDP version, so you make the connection, then let those, that is the woman or the seed, all the way up here, the woman and her seed fled into the wilderness. So here it is. And when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then you know that its laying waste is near. Then let those, the woman and her seed in Judah, flee to the mountains, that is, i.e., the wilderness, and let those who are in the midst of her go out, and let not those who are in the field enter her. This is history. This is way history for us. We're talking between 67 and 70 AD, all of this occurs. And while that's all occurring, Abba's people knew this was coming. Did they understand this prophecy the master's talking about here? Yes, they did, because they obeyed it. And they left. They got out when they saw the handwriting, so to speak, from using a Daniel term, when they saw the handwriting on the wall. This is the conflict. This conflict is real. This conflict costs lives. This conflict brings destruction. This conflict brings death. It brings mayhem. It brings the worst out of people, but it also brings the best out of people. It also brings obedience. It also brings love for those who do not lose hope and do not lose the truth. It's the battle for the truth, because the first casualty of war is truth, and then there's all sorts of casualties of war. And that's what we're looking at here. All sorts of casualties of war. This is real, guys. This is real. And the battle is not over yet. So when we hear things about, put on the whole armor of God, and we're thinking, these super hyper spiritual concepts and ideas, and I want to bind this and bind that. No, this is real. This is real stuff we're talking about here. This is real conflict we're talking about here, playing itself out in the story that we're reading, but also in the story that we are living. Okay, so let's take a look at the next slide. Now it's an earthly battlefield. This is the very next couple of verses in Revelation. I'm just continuing the story, the battle that goes on in Revelation 12. Here's Revelation 12 and verse 13. And when the dragon saw that he had been thrown to the earth, he persecuted. He who? Well, it's the dragon that's doing the persecuting, but who's he using to do the persecuting? Well, we know. This is history. Rome. He's using Rome. Pagan Rome. It's not Christian Rome yet, but it's pagan Rome. That's coming, but this is pagan Rome. He persecuted, that is Rome, the woman. Who did Rome persecute? Israel, Judah, Jerusalem, the temple, The Jews, that's who he's referring to when he says woman. They all fit the idiom. They all fit the type here. They're all part of the ongoing story of the conflict that starts in Genesis 3. He persecuted the woman who gave birth to the male child. Well, did all of those things give birth to Messiah? Yes, Israel gave birth to Messiah. Yes, Jerusalem gave birth to Messiah. Yes, Miriam gave birth to Messiah. Yes, Eve gave birth to Messiah. Yes, the Jews gave birth to Messiah. Yes, 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 all the way around. It all fits. And the woman, Israel, Jerusalem, Miriam, and the disciples, because now they're the seed, was given 2 wings of a great eagle. So what this is telling us is Rome is going after the Jews to persecute them. And then what does Abba do with the woman and her seed who now understand? They understand who Messiah was. They understand the story. They believe in him. The other Jews do not. The vast majority that are there in the city and in the world at that time do not. In fact, they doubled down on their rejection of him by 40 years later, multiple times, hated the concept and idea of Messiah. And so here it's telling us Rome is going to go after the woman, that is Jerusalem, that is the temple, who gave birth to the child, and the woman, because they're also Jews. They're also Jews. They're also Israel. Remember, the master says, I'm going to take the kingdom away from you and I'm going to give it to another nation. Well, what's the other nation he gives it to? Israel, spiritually opened eyes Israel. He's talking about the woman, not the woman on the earth, the woman who has Jerusalem up above. And the woman was given 2 wings of a great eagle. That's a turn right out of Exodus. So what does Abba do in Exodus? He gets them out of one really, really bad spot. The judgment's coming in. And he takes them to the wilderness. That's what this is telling us. That she was given 2 great wings of an eagle, like the Exodus, to fly into the wilderness, to the mountains, just like Messiah said, to her place where she is nourished. Here it is again. For a time, times, and half a time. Well, we just read it as 1,260 days, but now it's talking to us as time, times, and half a time. It's telling us the same story, just in a little bit different verbiage. Or 1,260 days. And here's where truth matters. Here's where the whole idea of the calendar and the feasts and the instruction and all the moedim, all of it comes into play. If truth is the thing that is the first casualty, there's no way to understand all of this. This is just numbers, and people are going to guess all the time trying to figure out what this is. But once we understand truth, once we get to the truth, all of a sudden the stuff starts to make sense. So when he says time, times, and half a time, or 1,260 days, what it's really telling us is 3.5 feast cycles, 3.5 years of Moedim. That's how long the siege of Jerusalem lasted. They went through 3.5 yearly cycles. And in the midst of the half a cycle, the temple falls. And where was Miriam and John and Thomas and all the rest of them, and anybody else in Jerusalem at the time who was Jewish, who believed in Mashiach? Where were they? They left. They followed the instructions of the Messiah, and they left. And out of his mouth the serpent spewed water, hatred, malice, propaganda, venom against the Jews, and scattered them like a flood, like a river after the woman. This is talking about the diaspora. So you've got the one part of the woman who's being spared or nourished for 1,260 days. You've got the other part of the woman, and there are 2 women there because there's one woman who's a harlot and the other one who's the chaste virgin. And they both are women who have the same genetic makeup. Another message, another time. So out of his mouth, the serpent spewed water, a flood, like a river after the woman. This is just historically true. Rome hated the Jews, despised them so much that not only did they destroy the temple, not only did they put all those people that did survive, of the 1 million or so that they killed, whoever did survive gets put into slavery, into sex slavery, work in the mines, putting them on gallows, making them row the boats. When you were a slave and you rowed the boat in that day, they chained you to the oar. You sat at that oar, you defecated, you ate, you slept, you lived your entire day sitting there at that oar, rowing that boat, until the day you died. Then they opened up the chains and threw you overboard. That's what happened to the people who survived in Jerusalem. And then what does Rome do? They wind up changing the name. They hated the Jews so much. They spoke so much venom, so much flood. They wanted to scatter them out. They wanted to get rid of them that they changed. They wind up eventually changing the name of Jerusalem to Cappadocia, and they wind up changing the name Israel to Syria Palestinia. And look where that's gotten us today. We're still dealing with this conflict. And it says, and the earth helped the woman. I'm right here so you guys can follow me. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the river. In other words, the Jews survived, even though they're scattered, even though like a flood, they're put all over the world, all over the Middle Eastern world, parts of Europe, Spain, Africa, Asia. They survived. They miraculously still survived, even though after all that time. We're not talking about the spiritual woman. This isn't the woman that the disciples are part of, but this is the woman. This is still Jerusalem. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed up the river, which the dragon had spewed out of his mouth. But he doesn't stop there, because it's not just about the woman. It's not just about the Jews. The battle takes the next step. It wasn't just the Roman hatred of the Jews. It winds up to be the Roman hatred of anything Jewish, including the story of the way. And verse 17. Now we're going to read this over again in just a second. We're going to read this over again in just a second. Verse 17. I'm right here, guys, so you can see. But I want to read it now, and I'll come back and comment on it in a second. But just remember that this is attached to everything we just read. And the dragon was enraged with the woman, Israel, Jerusalem, the Jews. And he went to fight, to make war, to spew venom, religious lies, and propaganda to help them to deny or forget the truth. What's the first casualty of war? The truth. But this isn't, he's enraged with the woman over this. So what does he do? He goes after the remnant of her seed. That's the people of the way, the branches, both Jew and Gentile. Those guarding the commandments of Elohim and possessing the witness of Yeshua Messiah. Now we'll get right back to that in just a second. I want to show this to you somewhere else to help put this in perspective, to show you how amazing this is. All right, here's Daniel. I got to do this real quick. Here's Daniel chapter 12, verse 1. This is what Messiah is quoting in Matthew 24, what he's quoting in Luke 21. What we just finished reading in Revelation 12 comes right out of Daniel. Daniel was telling us about this conflict that's going to come. Here's Daniel chapter 12. He says, now at that time, the time he's referring to is the time of the fourth beast in Daniel's dreams, in Nebuchadnezzar's dreams, but it's the sixth beast going into the seventh beast in the book of Revelation. I know, it sounds a little confusing. Another day, another time. But now at that time, at the time of the fourth beast, Rome, the serpent, Michael shall stand up. Wait a minute, we just finished reading that. Revelation 12. And there was war in heaven. And Michael and his angels fought against. That's what Daniel's telling us. And when does that happen in Revelation? When the temple's going to be destroyed, after the resurrection. And the temple's about to be destroyed because Satan is put down to the earth. And what is his tantrum when he gets down to the earth? Destroy the temple. Kill the temple. Wipe out Jerusalem. Scatter them all over. That's the war. Real casualties. Michael shall stand up, the great head who is standing over the sons of your people. What are the sons of his people? Israel, Jerusalem, the Jews, Judah. And there shall be a time of distress. When? When Michael stands up. What distress? The siege and destruction of Jerusalem and the temple and the people from 67 AD to 70 AD. And there shall be a time of distress such as never was since there was a nation until that time. And at that time, your people shall be delivered. Wait a minute. So a horrible time of distress, and yet the people are going to be delivered? Yes, two ways. One, the Messiah raises from the dead. That's deliverance to the people. Two, the woman is going to be led out of Jerusalem for time, times, and half a time, or 1,260 days, or get out of Jerusalem before Rome comes to lay siege. And at that time, your people shall be delivered, everyone who is found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth wake up, some to everlasting life, and some to reproaches and everlasting abhorrence. He's talking about the resurrection at the end. He's not saying it's going to happen at that time. He's talking about the resurrection at the end. Revelation 19. It says, and those having insight, those with understanding, those with eyes to see, ears to hear truth, shall shine like the brightness of the expanse. And those who lead many, both Jew and Gentile, the Netzarim, to righteousness, like the stars forever and ever. This is telling us the story of the gospel. But you, Daniel, hide the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall diligently search, and knowledge shall increase. Then I, Daniel, looked and saw two others standing on this bank of the river and on that bank. And one said to the man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, how long to the end of these wonders? In other words, how long to this time of distress? How long to this great thing? Well, he's going to tell him. How long? The next verse. Oh, I went too far. The next verse. And I heard a man dressed in linen who was above the waters of the river, and held up his right hand and his left hand to the heavens, and swore by him who lives forever, that it would be for an appointed time. He's asking, when is this going to happen? When is this great distress going to happen? He tells him it's going to happen at a Moedim, a feast cycle. 2 more Moedims, making 3 feast cycles, and then a half a Moedim, making 3.5 feast cycles. This whole story of the destruction and great distress, and yet the deliverance of the woman, is going to happen during a time, times, and half a time, or about 3.5 years, or 3.5 feast cycles, which means to understand this, you got to understand the calendar. You got to understand the truth. You got to be able to wrap your mind around it. If you think that stuff doesn't matter anymore, then none of this will make sense to us. And it doesn't. That's why people don't get it. That's why we've been blind to it. So one more time, it says that it would be for an appointed time. I'm right here. I'm going to highlight that. For an appointed time, a Moedim, a feast cycle. For appointed times, for 2 more feast cycles. And for a half a time, a half of the yearly feast cycle, or 1,260 days. And when they have ended scattering, flooding, when Rome floods, puts out like a flood, scatters the woman like a flood all around the earth. And when they have ended scattering the power of the set-apart people, then all these shall be completed. It hasn't been completed yet. They're still scattered all over the place. We're getting close, but they're still scattered. And I heard, but I did not understand. There's no way Daniel would have understood this. No way. He had no way to conceive any of this. People in the first century understood it because they believed Messiah, that when he said, when you see this, run. But guys, we've lost this. We have lost this for the last 1,700 years, 1,800 years. This is not known. This is not understood. We do not see it. Why? Because truth is the first casualty of war. And ever since the garden, the enemy has been trying to take away truth from us. And I heard and I did not understand. My master, what is the latter end of these matters? And he said, go, Daniel, for the words are hidden and sealed until the time of the end. Well, Messiah is the one that unseals them. We still don't get it for a long time till after Messiah, but it's unsealed. Many shall be cleansed and made white and refined. But the wrong, those who deny the truth, are just going to continue to do wrong. And none of the wrong shall understand. You know why we don't understand this? Because we don't have truth. We've rejected truth. We've removed truth. We've added to truth. We've taken away from truth. Truth is the first casualty of war, and without the truth, we are in trouble. They shall do wrong, and none of the wrong shall understand, but those who have insight. Insight into what? Into the truth, who start obeying, who puts it in their heart to obey, to learn, to do, coming out of darkness, trying to do the right thing. All of a sudden, this stuff will make sense to you. So here's the verse I told you to hold on to, Revelation 12, verse 17, because he's upset with the woman, right? He's mad at the woman. So what does he do? He hates the Jews. He scattered the Jews. Rome has scattered the Jews. He's destroyed the temple. But there's something that has come out of them that he also wants control of. It says in the dragon, chapter 12, verse 17, was enraged with the woman. That's Israel, Jerusalem, the Jews. And he, a Roman Babylonian religion, the next beast, who looks like a lamb, but speaks like a dragon, Revelation 13, he went to fight, to make war, to spew venom, because that's what serpents do, or religious lies and propaganda to help them to deny, to forget the truth. What is truth? Abba's word is truth. With the remnant of her seed, what seed? The people of the way. The people that are called the branches or the Netzarim, the believers in the Messiah, both Jew and Gentile, come from the woman. And what are they characterized as? Those, guys, I got it in pink there so it pops out at you. What are the people that are supposed, that the battle is actually against? Those who guard the commandments, keep the commandments, keep the instruction, keep the Torah, keep the truth, keep the word of Elohim, and possessing the witness of Yeshua, the Messiah. That's the people that the dragon is after right now. That's you, and that's me. As we're starting to understand truth, as we're seeing things we've never seen before, you need to understand where we are in the story. This is not the pie in the sky story that we've been told. This isn't just ask Abba for everything and he's going to pay for all your stuff and bless you, up the wazoo. That's not what this is. I know that's what we're told. This is not what this is. This is a war. This is a conflict. And the first casualty of war, well, don't let me tell you. In war, truth is often the first casualty. And it is now. And it is now. And we need to start to get back to it, to understand it. And we will. We're going to get into some of the truths Abba has given to us, the big, solid, huge portions of truth that do not ever change. None of it changes, but should not ever change. And then we're going to get into the deception, what we've been told, what Rome has told, because Rome's still in charge, guys. That beast is still in charge, still here. Rome's still here. All sorts of different names and groups, and et cetera, but it's still here. It's still here. Eastern and Western Rome is still here. Your Western nations and your Eastern nations, they're still here. And they're both Rome. It's still here. This war is still going on. The sum of the word is truth. The sum of your word, Abba, is truth. And your righteous rulings are forever. The Messiah says, I have set them apart in your truth. Your word is truth. And that's our study for tonight, guys. The first casualty of war is, in fact, the truth. Hopefully this is starting to make some sense to you guys, starting to get a bigger picture of everything that's going on. I know it's not the rosy, go to sort of church meeting type of, Bible study, I guess some people are looking for, but I want to understand what's going on. I want to understand the story. I want you to understand the story, because there's other things we need to understand, that you need to understand them in the context of this conflict, in the context of the adversary, in the context that truth has been watered down, added to, taken away. And so we're struggling now to try to get back to the truth. It's not easy. It's not easy. And listen, we make mistakes, lots of them, I'm sure. I know I have plenty, still making them, but we're trying to make them better. We're trying to get better. We're trying to go back to what the instruction says and do what the instruction says. And we're going to get there. I promise you, we're going to get there. We're just going to keep fighting. Keep fighting. Put on the breastplate, put that sword in your hand, get that shield of faith, get that helmet of salvation, and let's fight. Let's fight for truth. All right, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. Don't forget, if you have not subscribed, please subscribe. If you enjoyed the message, give us a thumbs up. Send it out to somebody. We would appreciate that. Don't forget to join us tomorrow morning for our morning manna, bright and early. We've been talking about the blessings, the true blessings of Elohim. Check it out tomorrow morning early. And, of course, this Friday night at 7:30 for Brother Max and I for our hidden manna. And, of course, this weekend as well, as we continue with the parable of the sower and the seed. Lots of neat stuff to talk about. It's all connected. It's all related, guys. Everything we do is related. So check it out. In the meantime, guys, have an awesome, awesome evening. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight. Shalom, everybody.